I will yield, and I'll turn now to the gentle lady from Wyoming for 5 minutes for questioning, if you are ready.
Thank you. I am ready. And thank you all for being here. I'm sorry I was not able to be here for the remainder of the hearing. I was over in a hearing on judiciary, in the Judiciary Committee, focusing on regulatory reform and what it is that we need to do in terms of addressing the agency overreach that we have seen, and especially in the last 30 years. And I don't think that there is a better example of that than what has been happening in Wyoming recently with the Rock Springs District Office Resource Management Plan. It is very apparent to me that that particular document in the Alternative B that was chosen recently by the BLM or last fall is a test case. And it is an effort by the BLM to determine whether they can turn our BLM lands essentially into National Park Service lands, and to exclude all of us, not only in terms of oil and gas development, but mining, grazing, and anything that produces revenue or generates revenue. Coming from Wyoming, 48% of our surface estate is owned by the federal government, 65% of our mineral estate is also owned by the federal government. And what is very apparent when you live in the West is that there are only certain uses that can generate revenue on vast swaths of land. It may not be that you always have oil and gas in a particular area, or coal in a particular area, or uranium, or grazing, but together, when you look at the way that our lands are situated and you look at the nature of our vegetation, this precipitation that we receive and those sorts of things, if you block grazing, if you block oil and gas development, if you block mining, there is no other way to generate revenue off of literally tens of millions of acres of land. And as a result, it not only is going to affect Wyoming and the Western United States, it will affect the country as a whole. Director Bingham, I appreciate you being here today. We appreciate all that you do, both for Sweetwater County and for the state of Wyoming. And you highlighted in your testimony many of the grievances regarding the process by which the preferred alternative, Alternative B, came about from the BLM. You're not the first one to bring this to my attention, and I want to highlight some testimony that I listened to from a former BLM staffer given to Wyoming's Joint Federal Natural Resources Management Committee. James Evans, who was a Rock Springs field office employee while the draft RMP was being developed, testified that the BLM's preferred alternative received very little time and effort in its development. In his own words, he said, quote, "The science and the work was all done on D, Alternative D. We sat down and in 1 week, we did Alternative B and C together. After that was done and we sat down with the cooperative agencies, we spent the next 5 or 6 years developing Alternative D. So the BLM spent 1 week on B and C and 5 to 6 years on Alternative D. Director Bingham, can you expound on what you know about the length of time that the BLM took to create what is now the preferred alternative in a 3.6 million acre resource management plan?
Thank you, Congressman Hageman. Yes, so back in 2012, when the cooperative meeting started, there were just a few meetings related to the alternative B and C, and also during that time there were a little bit of discussions on alternative D. So there was a small amount of time in that. There were a few cooperator meetings, and then there was a meeting at the end of the year, just one comment period for those alternatives B and C. I did hear Mr. Evans' testimony. I was there actually at the meeting via Zoom where he was testifying in front of the legislator, where it doesn't surprise me that it was done in that time period, just when you look at all the implications of it, and that it was described to cooperators as a bookend or placeholder, and then Alternative D was the compromise to come in between. So that is from 2015 on, there was a break because of the sage-grouse issue. It was all focused on Alternative D, and we were actually directed to only focus on Alternative D for the remainder of that 5 to 6 years that you mentioned?
So the entire process for FLPMA and the way that we manage our federal lands, the stakeholders that are in the communities themselves, this entire process is to ensure that the people who are actually affected by the decisions are engaged and able to participate, and that we are able to manage these lands in the best interest of everybody involved. And that's why you talk about things such as balance. We look at recreation, we look at access for oil and gas, we look at grazing, and not every single acre is used for all of those different types of activities, but you do a balance and you do a mosaic and you do a quilt and you figure out how we're going to manage these resources really ultimately in the best interests of the people of the United States of America, because they belong to us. They don't belong to Joe Biden. They don't belong to the BLM. They belong to us. We're the ones who have the right to access them. And what is very apparent to me by what happened with this particular RMP is this is the sign of the future for this administration and the folks on the other side of the aisle. They are going to do everything in their power to deny us access, management, and use to over 600 million acres of federal lands if they have the ability to do that. And this is just the first step. I thank you for the work that you've done. I thank everybody for being here and the work that you do making our lives better. And with that, I yield back.
The gentlelady yields, and we're going to close up shop here. I want to thank all of you for your testimony and taking the time